In the 7th century BC, a man in Nineveh sat down and wrote a letter to the king of Assyria. It was not a prayer, and it was not a poem, it was a report. If the moon is surrounded by a halo and Jupiter is standing inside it, the king will be besieged. That is not a horoscope. That is a threat assessment, filed by a salaried government scholar to a king who was going to act on it. And when the sky announced that the king was going to die, the state had a written procedure for it. They found somebody else, a gardener, a prisoner, a man nobody would miss. They put him on the throne and gave him the robes, the scepter, and a queen. For 100 days he was the king of Assyria, and everybody bowed to him. And then they killed him because the omen had to land on somebody. The Real king spent those 100 days in a side room, calling himself the farmer. Then he came back, and the danger had been spent on somebody else. Whatever that is, it is not people being silly. That is a government paying an enormous price to act on a forecast it genuinely believed. So the question is not why ancient people were stupid, because they were not. The question is why the most numerate people alive spent 3,000 years staring upwards. They had reasons, and the reasons were good. Start with the world they were standing in. Almost nothing in it was predictable. The rain does not keep its appointments. The river floods early or late or not at all. The harvest fails. The enemy arrives. A child gets a fever, and nobody knows why. Every system that matters to you is noisy, and none of it can be checked. And then above all of it, there is the sky. The sky repeats. Exactly. Forever. The same lights in the same order on the same nights, for as long as anybody has bothered to count. It is free, it is public, and anybody can check your work. In a world with no instruments, it is the only thing that holds still long enough to be studied. And here is the part everybody forgets. It works. When Sirius rises just before dawn, the Nile is about to flood. That is not mysticism. That is a calendar, and the Egyptian state ran on it. Hesiod tells Greek farmers to harvest when the Pleiades rise and to plow when they set. That is an agricultural manual, and the whole thing is keyed to stars. Sailing season, frost, monsoon, migration. The sky tells you first every time. So for most of human history, the sky predicts what is coming was not a superstition. It was the best supported piece of knowledge anybody had, which means the mistake was never believing that the sky predicts things. The sky does predict things. That part is simply true. The mistake is one step further out, and then another. From the sky tells you the season, to the sky tells you the harvest. From the harvest to the war. From the war to the king. And finally, thousands of years in, from the king to you. Every step is small. Every step is reasonable. The last one is wrong. So they wrote the omens down, and they did not stop. Enuma Anu Enlil. About 70 tablets. Roughly 7,000 omens. And look at what they are actually about. The king, the army, the harvest, the flood, the state. Not you. Nobody was casting your birth chart, because you did not matter. This was national security, and it was staffed the way national security is staffed. The Assyrian court kept scholars on salary across the empire, filing written reports to the palace. Hundreds of those letters survive, and you can read them. They contradict each other. They hedge. They complain about not being paid. It is a functioning scientific civil service 26 centuries ago. And to do the job, somebody had to watch every night and write it down, which is what they did for almost 600 years without a gap. The Babylonian astronomical diaries run from about 650 BC to about 60 BC. The moon, the planets, the eclipses, the weather, the level of the river, the price of barley. Nothing in modern science has run that long. Not one experiment. Not one survey. The longest continuous observation program in the history of our species was run to protect the king. And out of that pile of numbers, things began to fall out. Eclipses repeat. Not simply, but they repeat. 223 lunar months, and the pattern comes round again. They found the cycle, and they could predict an eclipse. Centuries before anybody had the faintest idea what an eclipse actually was. Prediction came first. Explanation arrived 2,000 years later. Then, around the 5th century BC, they did the thing that changed everything. Until then, the constellations were ragged. Different sizes, different shapes, no system. So they cut the sky into 12 equal slices of 30 degrees. That is the zodiac. And it is not mysticism. It is a coordinate system. It is the first coordinate system anybody ever built. And once the sky has coordinates, you no longer need to look at it. You can calculate it, which is exactly when the personal horoscope shows up. The oldest birth charts we have are Babylonian from around 410 BC. And they're not for kings. They're for ordinary people with names and a date. Because the moment it becomes arithmetic, anybody can be given a reading. It was not a spiritual revolution. It was the maths getting portable. From Babylon, it moves west, and in Greek Egypt, it is rebuilt into the thing you would recognize. The rising sign, the 12 houses, the aspects. All of that is Greek, and all of it is late. Then Ptolemy writes it down properly and gives it something it never had, a physical theory. His argument is not magic. It is mechanics, and you should hear it before you laugh at it. The sun obviously reaches down here and changes things. You can feel it on your arm. The moon obviously reaches down here and moves the entire ocean twice a day. Two bodies in the sky demonstrably act on the earth from a very long way away. So why would they be the only two? That is a good inference from the evidence available at the time. It is wrong, but wrong and stupid are not the same thing. And Ptolemy knew. He says it outright. This one is conjecture, and it can fail. He wrote the astronomy as well. He knew which of his two books was the solid one. Because for almost all of history, astronomy and astrology were not two jobs. They were one job. Kepler cast horoscopes. Galileo cast horoscopes, including for his own daughters. Tycho Brahe was a court astrologer, and it paid for the finest observatory in Europe. Medieval universities taught it in the medical faculty, and physicians checked the moon before cutting you open. And here is the uncomfortable part. Kings do not pay for cosmology. Kings pay for forecasts. Astrology was the funding model for astronomy for 2,000 years. We know where the planets are because powerful men wanted to know what was going to happen to them. Look at what came out of it. Base 60 from Babylon is still strapped to your wrist. 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and 360 degrees in a circle. Your GPS position is written in arc minutes and arc seconds. That is Babylonian notation. Hipparchus compared his own measurements against old records and found the entire sky slowly turning. Precession, discovered because somebody else had kept the books for 400 years. And Tycho's astrological day, Job, produced the numbers Kepler turned into the laws of planetary motion. And the diaries are still working now. Those eclipse records are used today by geophysicists this decade. We know exactly when and where each of those eclipses was seen. And if it was not seen where it should have been, the Earth is not spinning at the rate you assumed. That is how we measure our own planet slowing down. Numbers collected to keep a king alive are now used to measure the rotation of the Earth. It never told them what they wanted. It told us something they could not have imagined wanting. So, does it predict a person? This has been tested properly more than once, and the answer is no. In 1985, Sean Carlson published a double-blind trial in Nature. The protocol was agreed in advance with the astrologers, who confirmed it was fair before it ran. Given a birth chart and 3 personality profiles, they picked the right one at chance. Then the cleanest test that exists. Time twins. Over 2,000 people born in London within minutes of each other and followed for decades. Astrologically, the same chart, the same everything, measured on about 100 things. Intelligence, anxiety, aggression, marriage, occupation. No similarity beyond chance. Not a trace. So why does a reading feel so accurate? In 1949, Bertram Forer handed his students a personality profile and asked how well it fitted them. The average score was 4.26 out of 5. It was the same profile. Every student in the room had the identical page. And the version you know is barely a lifetime old. Newspaper star signs were invented in 1930. Now, people say that we forgot the real science behind all of this. Half of that is true. Babylonian mathematical astronomy really was lost for 2,000 years. It came back in the 20th century when Otto Neugebauer sat down and read the tablets, line by line. And when we got it back, we found that the parts that worked were the maths. So we did not forget the science. We kept every piece of it that ever worked, and we renamed it astronomy. 3,000 years of the most patient watching anyone has ever done. They were looking for a message, and they built a science instead.